earlier. Polly, what do you make of the move by Vince Cable to deal with executive pay? Talking about legislation in the new year, possibly?
Very interesting. I mean, as Ed Ball says, though, he could start by using the stuff that the legislation that's there already to at least make things more transparent. I'm not sure transparency does it, though, because we know they've earned this grotesque 49% increase, and yet there doesn't seem to be any mechanism. I don't know until we see the legislation. The problem is that most of these shareholders are the big institutions who are themselves sitting on each other's remuneration committee, deciding that what's normal is, well, about 49%. And unless we see some mechanism that's much more than just giving shareholders power, they've got the power, they could be voting against it very occasionally, they do, but very rarely.
And Paul, it was interesting to see Vince Cable almost linking the whole issue of executive pay with the protesters at St Paul's, offering sympathy. I have sympathy for, some of what they're doing, if not what their proposals are. You could have got, on any week, in any year for the last 4 decades, I would have thought, a group of protesters who would want to go and camp outside St Paul's Cathedral and say there's a crisis in capitalism. But now there is a resonance.
There's a resonance mainly because of this narrative of the 99% feeling that the 1% are the ones that have caused this great crisis. If you buy into that narrative, of course, people on the steps of St Paul's are going to get some airplay. However, what's interesting is that I don't think, forgive the pun, that Vince Cable's had a Pauline conversion to direct action, and neither has David Cameron for that matter. But they both realise they've got to be seen to be connecting with the broad mass of the British public. I'm not sure about this idea of executive pay being more transparent and therefore there being results, because let's be honest, pension funds are the ones who are going to be most active about that. They only make up about 20% at most of most companies' shareholders.
Polly, what do you make of the reaction, the political reaction there has been to the St Paul's protesters?
I think it's been fascinating. I've only been there about 3 weeks. They have had an incredible impact. If you think that in that time they've got the Archbishop of Canterbury to write an article in the Financial Times calling for a Robin Hood tax. Don't think he'd have done it without them there. It's forced attention onto the Church of England, which has been for a long time now no longer the Conservative Party at prayer, but actually to the left. Pollsters have found that for a long time, Catholics even more so. I think the reason it's been so effective is the great drama that's going on, what Vince Cable calls the war out there. Everybody knows this appalling thundercloud is coming our way, and so there is a real sense of alarm about crisis of capitalism. It has some resonance.
And at the end of this month we get George Osborne setting out the financial statement. Do you believe that actually in terms of growth strategy, we're getting to hear the government talking about growth more and more, that actually there's maybe not that much difference now between Labour and the coalition on the whole issue of growth?
Well, what's curious is actually the way this Chancellor, who's as deeply a political Chancellor as Gordon Brown ever was, is using Brown-style policies to actually promote this idea of growth. So we've got this idea of credit easing, classic Brown idea. I'm not sure whether it'll ever work. Similarly, you've got this idea that you're going to have more private sector bondholders to provoke more investment in the infrastructure. Again, I'm not sure that's going to work, but they sound politically sensible. So that's why he's going to do them. And when he stands up in the House later this month, he'll try and get lots of plaudits for stealing Labour's clothes. I think the real problem is that between now and the next election, the real battle will be over who gets the blame for the sluggish growth we're going to endure in the next few years. And the government are already building up the alibi, which is actually it's the Eurozone's fault. But just as Gordon Brown didn't get away with that in 2010 because of the global financial crisis, I'm not sure they will.
Is the growth strategy going to roar like a lion or squeak like a mouse?
Well, the trouble is very little of it is, as it were, shovel-ready, and there isn't any government money in it. And if private industry were going to invest in all of these things, I think they'd have done so by now. Large companies are sitting on very large sums of money, afraid to invest. It's going to take a government stimulus to get them to let go of that money that's sitting there already. And I don't see the sign of the government being willing to be that imaginative or that bold. And the other thing is, the difference, if there was Gordon Brown here now, he would be busy storming around the world as he did before, saying, we have to do something about this, instead of which Cameron and Osborne standing on the sidelines saying, do something to everybody else. There is no world leadership here. And I'm not a great fan of Gordon Brown, but the one thing he did do in the last great crisis was to knock heads together and get people together to make a decision right now. And we need that more than ever. But Cameron and Osborne, not at all.
OK. Polly Toynbee, Paul Walt, thank you so much for being with us here on The Politics Show.